All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. If I can ask all the authors to mute themselves. And if the audience wants to put their screen on speaker view, or if you want to see everybody, that's your prerogative, but we are going to go one author at a time alphabetically. So if you want to see the author who is speaking on the big screen, just put your cursor to speaker view. So welcome everybody. My name is Susan Macbeth. I'm the founder and owner of Adventures by the Book, and I have my team of Debbie and Amber standing behind the scenes to help with the chat and the behind the scenes technology. This is our first ever PitchFest. We have over 300 people signed up from almost every of the 50 states, 5 Canadian provinces, Philippines, and New Zealand. So clearly this is something that you guys are excited about, and we're excited to be sharing with you 20 amazing book club favorite authors. And we're going to go in alphabetical order, one at a time. Everybody gets about 5 minutes to speak. We're not going to be doing a lot of chatting in the chat box because we really want to take time for you to pay attention to the authors and what they're speaking about. You should have all got via email your cheat sheet, which has all the authors' books on there, and a little section for you to make your notes, and a little section at the end for you to order books, and we'll send signed book plates with those book orders as well. And some of them are not published yet, but we can pre-order them for you and get those shipped to you. And if you want to order copies for your book club, if you order 5 or more copies from each author, we'll give you a 20% discount as well. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started with our first author, Kara Black. And Kara is a New York Times and USA Today best-selling author of 20 books in the Private Investigator Amy LeDuc series and 2 World War II set novels featuring American markswoman, Kate Reese. In her new book, The Night Flight to Paris, it is once again up to American markswoman Kate Reese to take the shot that just might win or lose World War II in the follow-up to her national bestseller, 3 Hours in Paris. Welcome, Kara, and take it away.
Hi, it's Kara Black. Thank you, Susan. And I want to thank Novel Network for the invitation, giving me the chance to tell you about my new book, Night Flight to Paris, which I'm really excited about. And I just love joining you, sharing with all these great authors, and I'm thrilled to hear about their books too. So Night Flight to Paris is a spy thriller set in 1942. It's about revenge and bravery and the realities of women's life and women's work during World War II. So in the story, it's been 2 years since Kate Reese, in 3 Hours to Paris, was sent to Paris on a British Secret Service mission to assassinate Hitler. Spoiler alert, he survived. Since then, she has left spycraft behind to take on training sharpshooting agents up in the Scottish Highlands. But her quiet life is disrupted when Colonel Stepney, her former handler, drags her back into the fray for a risky 3-pronged mission, and where she will be a wanted woman. Each task is more dangerous than the next: delivering a package of penicillin to sick children, assassinating a high-ranking German operative whose knowledge of secret invasion plans could turn the tide of the war against the Allies. Most compelling for Kate is to rescue a British aristocrat come agent, Margot, who once saved Kate's life, and to escape. Kate will encounter sheiks and spies, poets and partisans, as she races to keep up with the constantly shifting nature of her mission, showing every ounce of her Oregonian grit in the process. Because Kate is a young woman from Oregon who grew up in the backwoods in the rural countryside during the Depression. She learned to shoot as soon as she could hold a rifle, and her father would take her out and teach her to hunt and to defend the ranch from wolves and predators. She also grew up with 5 brothers. So that's where a lot of that grit and resilience comes from. So while she was a young woman, she went to Paris. She met a Welsh engineer. They married. They had a baby girl, Lisbeth. They go back to the islands, and tragically, there's a Luftwaffe bombing while the family is stationed in the Orkney Islands, and she loses her family. So Kate has lost her family. She cannot return to America over the Atlantic because of the submarines. And after 3 hours in Paris with her failed mission, she has narrowly escaped the Gestapo and she's wanted. So it's a big risk for her to return to Paris. But I really wanted to write about women's roles during World War II that are not often talked about. There's a great quote: "When you study history, you must ask yourself, whose story am I missing? Whose voice was suppressed?" And I wanted to get away from the romanticized notions in Mata Hari to relatable women in wartime. Women had to play roles because the men were off being soldiers or in prisoner of war camps. To me, it was about writing a story of what a woman could and would actually do. Maybe someone like you or me who just had to step up. It's important that it's plausible and real. Kate wasn't a true spy, and she had to do things by the seat of her skirt, the seat of her pants, and think on her feet during missions. And so women stepped up, not only on the home front with work and children, but other theaters of war. And over the course of my research, I learned so much about women's roles in intelligence. Since women couldn't serve on the battlefield, women answered the call of duty and they worked in signals, intelligence. They were learning code, decrypting, encrypting it. And I think that that era is so very ripe for attention. And even though the issues that caused World War II were specific to that period, the themes are universal. I think we're all, kind of, just kind of, there's an allure about World War II. And that what would you do often? When I was writing this story, I was thinking, given the stakes and the danger and the risks, to make it plausible, I kept asking myself, what would I have done? So there's a big moral ambiguity that writers can plumb. Good people doing bad things, bad people doing good things, ordinary people becoming heroes. And I hope that this will intrigue you. And I hope that you'll come to 1942 for a night flight to Paris. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kara. And for those who want to learn more, Kara is going to be one of our, Kara, I'm sorry, I keep saying that, is going to be one of our 6 authors at our popular book bingo series on February 2nd, Groundhog Day. So you can visit our website to join her and 5 other authors for that fun event. Thank you, Kara. And next up is Marie Bostwick. Marie is a USA Today and New York Times bestselling author of uplifting historical and women's fiction, including the popular Cobbled Court Quilt and Too Much Texas series of books. In Esme Cahill Fails Spectacularly After Losing Her Publishing Job, failed writer turned editor Esme Cahill heads home to Asheville and discovers her grandmother's untold story, that of a gifted artist but unsung hero. Welcome, Marie.
Thank you so much. And thanks everybody for coming and for Susan for hosting this. I had to sign a contract in blood saying that I wouldn't take more than my 5 minutes. So normally I would just talk, but I actually wrote it out. So forgive me for reading to you, but otherwise I'd just go on all day about this book because I love it so much. Okay, so here we go. Esme Cahill Failed Spectacularly tells the story of 2 talented young women from different eras, each struggling with the setbacks and self-doubts as she strives to carve out a living as an artist. The first is Esme Cahill. When Esme left Asheville, North Carolina and moved to New York, she was young, ambitious, optimistic, and determined to become a best-selling novelist. But after 268 rejections, Esme threw in the towel, gave up on writing, took a job at a publishing house where she eventually became a respected and successful editor. 15 years later, her successful life starts to unravel. Divorced, jobless, and discouraged, Esme returns home to Asheville and the Lakeside Lodge where she had been raised by her loving, slightly eccentric grandparents, George and Adele. Sadly, Esme's return comes too late to reconnect with Adele, who had called asking Esme to join her in on a project that she wouldn't discuss over the phone. But sadly, she died just 5 days after that call. Arriving home, Esme discovers that the once idyllic lodge is sliding toward physical and financial ruin. Her beloved grandfather is beginning to lose his memories, and her relationship with her reckless, combative, former jailbird mother, Robin, is just as strained as it ever was. With so much going wrong and so much at stake, Esme could be forgiven for forgetting about Adele's mysterious last request. However, after Esme begins having visions of a young woman dressed in 1940s garb and discovers a hidden trove of museum-worthy quilts sewn by Adele, she realizes that even from beyond the grave, Adele has a story to tell, and she expects Esme to tell it for her. As Esme researches a forgotten chapter in her family history, uncovering the inspiration behind Adele's masterfully crafted quilts and a surprising role she played when the historic Biltmore estate became a secret repository of America's most treasured artwork during World War II, Esme discovers her grandmother's untold story, that of a gifted artist who never received her due. While bringing Adele's history to life, Esme finds parallels in her own story, parallels that will help her to cherish life's detours, right old wrongs and heal old wounds, to build the family she's always dreamed of, but in a way she never imagined, and to chart a path from spectacular failure to ultimate fulfillment. And in a final gift of love, Esme returns the favor to Adele, finding a way to fulfill the young woman's deepest longing and to give a talented, unsung artist the respect and recognition that she always deserved. My friends, this is my 20th novel, which is amazing considering how young I look. In it, I have packed everything I have learned over 2 decades of writing: humor, drama, an ensemble cast of quirky characters that you cannot help but root for. I didn't even get to go into so many of them. A bit of magic, a hint of romance, and an intriguing fictional connection to real-life historical events. These intertwining stories set in modern times, one set in modern times, one set in World War II, are woven with themes of community and creativity, family and forgiveness, how to push past self-doubt and criticism to reframe failure and start fresh, and how the hard work of forgiveness can clear a path to a more meaningful life. Now look, every book isn't for everybody. It's not a one-size-fits-all thing. So if dark, tragic tales with ambiguous endings really make your heart beat faster, Esme may not be your cup of tea. However, if laughter through tears is your favorite emotion, and if you love books that entertain, inspire, uplift, and leave you with plenty of food for thought, you and I should talk. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Marie. Perfect. And some of you may be wondering how we picked our 20 authors for our first annual PitchFest. Is all 20 authors are Novel Network authors. And what that means is they're available and excited and interested in meeting with book clubs. So you can go to novelnetwork.com, click on any of them or all of them. And once you pick their books, you can schedule them for a visit on Zoom or however you do your virtual events. Some authors, I think, are even going back to in-person events, but you'll see on the website, and you can get all the information there. It's free to join, novelnetwork.com. And all these authors have recently released books or soon to be released books. So they're excited for you to learn about them, to pick them up, read them, share them with your book club, share them with your library group and your other reading friends. Thank you, Marie. Up next is Kimberly Brock, who is the best-selling author of an award-winning debut, The River Witch. She is the founder of Tinderbox Writers Workshop and has served as a guest lecturer for many regional and national writing workshops, including the Pat Conroy Literary Center. In her book, The Lost Book of Eleanor Dare, what happened to the lost colony of Roanoke remains a mystery, but the women who descended from Eleanor Dare have long known that the truth lies in what she left behind, a message carved into a large stone and the contents of her treasured commonplace book. Welcome, Kimberly. We can't wait to hear more. And Kimberly, you'll need to unmute yourself.
Now you can hear me. This is great. Thank you so much for having me. And I got to tell you, I'm not going to be able to remember what my book's about. I'm listening to these other books. So The Lost Book of Eleanor Dare is obviously a big historical fiction novel. It's the jumping off point is the mystery of the lost colony of Roanoke. It's the oldest American mystery. Most people learn about it in like elementary school. That's when I learned about it. And I was always really intrigued with this idea of this story that didn't have an ending. And then about 20 years ago, when my kids were in diapers, I learned about a connection to my home state of Georgia. So in the 1930s and 40s, this series of stones were found. They started in North Carolina, and there was a trail of them that led down into Georgia. And they were inscribed with a story that supposedly came from one of the survivors of the colony, Eleanor Dare. She was the daughter of the governor of the colony, and you probably know her daughter's name, Virginia Dare. But nobody knows much about Eleanor, and Eleanor doesn't have a history. She disappeared into history. So I started to imagine the idea of that story. And when it hit the papers, it was huge. It was this big fanatic thing that people were obsessed with. And then they were all debunked as a big hoax in the Saturday Evening Post. And all except the first one. The first stone, nobody has ever proved if it was real or not. And I thought, who would that matter to? To me, a story like this, and my favorite kind of historical fiction to read, is about people, not necessarily historical fact, but the lives that are being lived out during that period of history. And so I chose to imagine a family that had this story in it, and they don't know if it's true or not. It's an oral history, and it's been passed down in a book that belongs to the women in this family for 16 generations. The story takes place at the end of World War II on the home front, which I think is a little different than a lot of the books I pick up that are set in World War II time period. It's actually set on the coast of Georgia near Savannah, and Alice Young, who is a young war widow, and her 13-year-old daughter, who is very precocious, Penn, come back to this family estate that's been abandoned, where they are reunited with the book that belonged to the women in their family and this story, and they have to kind of figure out what to make of it. Who does that make us? Do we believe it's true? What do our mothers share with us? Is it always a true story? Does it matter if it's told, if it's not completely true? So it's a slow Southern fiction. I always tell book clubs when I talk to them to expect it to be like barbecue. It's low and slow, and it's a sweet story, and it's a hopeful story, but it does ask some questions about how you make a home, how you set a table, and who you invite to sit at that table with you. I thought those were questions that Eleanor Dare, 19 years old and pregnant and standing there and all of the world lost to her, was having to grapple with. How do you make a home? How do you move away from that stone? And maybe what these women at the end of World War II were thinking, and I think a lot of us are thinking today too.
Thank you, Kimberly. Okay, now I'm hungry for barbecue. And Kimberly is going to be one of our 6 authors at our February 2nd book bingo. So to learn more about her and for another giveaway, you can join us then. It's a free event. Just go to our website. Next up is Joy Calloway, who is the international best-selling author of The Grand Design, the Fifth Avenue Artists Society, and Secret Sisters. Her newest book, All the Pretty Places, is a captivating story of a strong woman in a striking setting, based on her great-great-grandmother and her family who owned the largest plant nursery in the Northeast, examining the life-changing effects of the beauty of nature and how that splendor was restricted to the rich and privileged in the Gilded Age. Welcome, Joy.
Thank you so much, guys. If you hear my teeth chattering, it's because my husband, I think, dropped the heat in our house to like 60 degrees or something like that. So I was actually considering putting on my jacket a second ago. So if you hear it, it's just my Southern, I don't have a lot of tolerance for cold, I guess. So thank you for the introduction. I'm so excited to be here. And like Susan said, this story is super special to me. If you guys have ever read any of my other work, it should come as no surprise to you that this story is once again kind of pulled from my ancestry. The story takes place during the Gilded Age. specifically during the Panic of 1893, which was the worst economic downturn before the Great Depression. And it's based on, like I said, on my great-great-grandmother, who was an amazing horticulturist and landscape architect. And her family owned the largest plant nursery in the Northeast. And back then, you know, they were doing a lot of New York Gilded Age, the industrialist summer homes. They lived in Westchester County in Rye, New York. And they were, you know, providing landscape architecture services, but they were also providing plants for Olmsted and Vaux and some big planters like that during that time period. When the story opens, my main character, Sadie, is really excited because they finally shipped her two brothers off. One has gone into politics and one has gone to Florida to work for Flagler at his hotels. And so she finally thinks, okay, great, I get a chance potentially for my dad to see me as a worthy successor, because of course back then she wouldn't have been considered. And so she's very excited about this. She thinks it's her passion is our plants, and she's like, I'm the only one left. Surely they're going to see me now. And instead, what happens is the love of her life, who she thought was long gone, suddenly shows up. And then on top of that, on the heels of him coming back into her life, she's planting this elaborate Gilded Age garden. And of course, if you guys have seen photos of any Gilded Age mansion or Gilded Age garden, they're always walled off by these usually big wrought iron gates. And so she's standing in front of those, planting a rose garden, when she has a conversation with a man who's kind of lost everything during this panic. He's lost his family, he's lost his job. And she sees people kind of start to linger outside of these gates, looking in. And she finds out through her conversation with him that they're looking in for a glimpse of hope. They're looking in at the flowers and saying that just because, you know, it's a symbol of miracles, that they can still happen, that even though his life is terrible now, you know, beauty can come from just a seed. All we need is that seed of hope. And she starts to realize that, and look around her and start to see that, you know, beauty is restricted to these people. Natural beauty is not something that everyone can take for granted back then. So, and she starts to kind of be challenged by that and see that potentially her taking over the nursery business is not just something that would help her fulfill her own passion, but potentially it could change her life. And this is something that could maybe help others as well. And so it's really just about, you know, who owns beauty, who owns natural beauty, and kind of how that evolved and how the evolution of public parks came to be. And it was just so interesting to learn about, really, even Central Park, just how, you know, it was built for the people, but it was not the people's park. It was so far from the tenements and the factories. And just learning about that was so fascinating too. So if you like plants and you like hope and you like the promise of miracles and just the way that couple interactions can change your life, then I think you'll love this book. And thank you guys so much for letting me be a part of it.
Thank you, Joy. And we love the beautiful plant behind you too.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I inherited this from a neighbor. It's a hibiscus.
Love it.
Yes,
Thank
very
you.
pretty. Thanks.
All right. Next up is Jennifer Coburn, the author of the historical novel Cradles of the Reich, about three very different women living at a Nazi Lebensborn breeding home at the start of World War II. Jennifer has also published a mother-daughter travel memoir, We'll Always Have Paris, as well as 6 contemporary women's novels. And I just recently saw this quote from the Associated Press. It was a review of her book. Every historical novel should strive to be this compelling, this well-researched, and flat out just this good. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. And thanks for tuning in today. Thank you to Novel Network and Adventures by the Book and your team for hosting this wonderful Pitch Fest. It's really an honor to be here with so many authors whose work I admire, and also book lovers like you. So, as Susan said, Cradles of the Reich is a historical novel about 3 very different German women who meet at a Nazi Lebensborn breeding home. Now, if you just stopped and said, did she just say Nazi breeding home? That's the same reaction that I had when I first heard about this program. It was Heinrich Himmler's plan to create 2 million racially valuable babies for Hitler's so-called master race. And the Lebensborn program operated in 3 ways. 1, they set up maternity homes for unwed German women. 2, they arranged sexual liaisons for German women and SS officers. And 3, when the war began in 1939, Nazi soldiers began identifying blonde hair, blue-eyed children from countries that Nazis invaded and kidnapped them. Now, when I first heard about this, I was horrified and fascinated. I had a lot of questions. I wanted to know how the women were selected, where these homes were, and why. Why would women volunteer to have sex with strangers just to have a child for the Reich? And that's what they called it, having a baby for Hitler. So I did what I always do when I want to learn about a period of history. I looked for a well-researched historical novel that would not only answer my questions about the Lebensborn Society, but would tell me the story of the women and tell this story through the lens of their relationships. What I found was that there were many nonfiction books, but no novels. So I decided to write the novel that I wanted to read with a book club. I was really honored when the book came out, when Kirkus Reviews called Cradles of the Reich a deep well of discussions for book clubs, because that is exactly what I had hoped to do. Cradles of the Reich is told through 3 different points of view. The 3 female protagonists represent the choices that Aryan women had in Germany 1939. There's the resistor, the bystander, and the Nazi true believer. Because these characters have such vastly different views of the Reich, they have different needs and desires, and they are often in conflict with one another. So book clubs are going to have a lot to talk about in terms of relationships, situations, and different characters. There's even a book club guide in the back. So of course I am thrilled when I get good reviews, but the most important feedback that I get is from readers like you. So I'm really hoping that your book club will choose Cradles of the Reich and invite me to one of your gatherings this year. Here's what I offer book clubs. I have a short presentation with historical photos that will provide you a deeper understanding of my novel, the Lebensborn program, my personal connection to the material, my research, and of course, I will answer all of your questions. Now, do you have to listen to my 20-minute presentation? No, it is an option for you to choose if you would like. I'm available for book clubs, book festivals, library events, panels, and keynote addresses. I invite you to check out my website at jennifercoburn.com, and I would love to connect with you on social media. On Facebook and Instagram, I am at Jennifer Coburn Books. Thank you for being here and for supporting authors, because we cannot tell our stories if not for readers like you. So I know I speak for all of the authors on the panel today when I say we really appreciate you. So thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. And for those who want to meet Jennifer in person, she's going to be appearing at our 4th annual Superbook event in San Diego on February 16th. Now, if you're in or near San Diego, or you want to get away from your cold weather and fly to San Diego for this event, we will be featuring 20 authors live. Jennifer will be one of the authors. She'll be moderating a panel, and you can meet her in person. And for the first time ever, we are doing virtual tickets. We're going to broadcast it live on Zoom. So just go to our website, adventuresbythebook.com, and learn about that. And just a little tidbit, you won't see this on our website yet, so you may sure you want to follow us, is we are going to start a whole series in April, Reading Between the Vines. It's going to be a wine and book pairing event up in Sonoma, and we have several Sundays in April, and she's going to be appearing one of those. So stay tuned for further details. Thank you, Jennifer. Next up, we have Michelle Cox, who is the author of the multiple award-winning Henrietta and Inspector Howard series, as well as Novel Notes of Local Lore, a weekly blog dedicated to Chicago's forgotten residents. Her books have been praised by Kirkus, Library Journal, Publishers Weekly, and Booklist, as well as many others. In the 6th book of her series, A Spying Eye, a Henrietta and Inspector Howard novel, Clive and Henrietta return to Europe in an attempt to resurrect their failed honeymoon. While in London, they search for the missing panel of the Ghent altarpiece, a famous Renaissance painting of which Hitler's top men are also in pursuit. Welcome, Michelle.
Hi everyone. Thanks for having me. So as Susan was saying, A Spying Eye is book 6 in my Henrietta and Inspector Howard series, which is based in Chicago in the 1930s, but a lot of this book takes place in Strasbourg. So if you like historical mystery with a heavy dose of romance, this book is for you. Even though it's part of a series, it can definitely be read as a standalone. It's been on 4 book tours so far, and all of the reviewers have stated, verified that it definitely can be read as a standalone. You can jump right into the story. So if you're not familiar with my Henrietta and Inspector Howard series, I'll just give you a little bit of background. So Henrietta is a very spunky young woman who gets herself entangled with an inspector of the Chicago police when her dance hall boss is murdered. Now, what's interesting is that Henrietta is based on a real woman that I met while working in a nursing home. And much of what happens in book 1, which is A Girl Like You, really did happen. So she used to tell me that once upon a time, I had a man-stopping body and a personality to go with it. And I laughed every time she said that. And, you know, somehow I could just like imagine that. So though she lived during the Great Depression, she apparently never had a problem getting a job, probably because of her beauty. She had a problem keeping a job. So inevitably she would be trapped in the back room or the kitchen by her boss, who would try to feel her up, or worse, she would slap him and then she would be out. So I just thought that took incredible courage and spunk for somebody to do that when there were people lined up around the block during the Depression, you know, waiting for a job. So I just thought she would make a great heroine. She had a reputation in her neighborhood, despite her bombshell looks, for being a good girl. And the neighborhood boys were so worried about her getting off of the bus or the trolley when she would get off really late at night, that they would follow her home until she made it safely. So that's Henrietta. Clive, meanwhile, is not based on a real person. He is the aloof detective of the Chicago police. He's a man on the run from his own past, his days as a captain in World War I, the death of his wife and child, but he's also trying to ignore the looming responsibility of one day having to take over his parents' palatial estate on the North Shore of Chicago, something he wants nothing to do with. So the two, Henrietta and Clive, that is, meet when Henrietta's dance boss, as I mentioned before, Mama Leone, is murdered, and you know, things go from there. So fast forward to this installment. Henrietta and Clive return to Europe to try to recapture their lost honeymoon. While in London, they are approached by their old friend, Inspector John Hartle, who urges them to search for the missing panel of the Ghent altarpiece, as well as a missing MI5 agent, while they're in Strasbourg, staying with Baron von Harman, who is Henrietta's estranged distant relative. So little do they know that Hitler's top men are also in pursuit of the panel, as Hitler believes it to contain a coded map to weapons of unlimited power. And what makes this story so fascinating is that so much of it is real, which I explain in a long author's note at the end of the book. A panel of the Ghent altarpiece, one of the world's most valuable paintings, really did go missing on the night of April 10th, 1934, and it remains missing to this day. So it is still an open case. And Hitler really was desperate to possess it and had teams all around the world looking for it. So people have called this book a mashup of Indiana Jones, Da Vinci Code, and Downton Abbey. There's a lot of subplots running with all of the characters back in Chicago. It's a lot of fun. It's a very visual, fast-paced set of books that have won over 60 awards, and readers are constantly telling me that they really feel like they're watching a movie, that they're really in the story, that they've been transported back in time, and that they love the characters. So I hope you'll give it a try.
Thank you, Michelle.
Yeah.
Okay, next up is Sadiqa Johnson, and Sadiqa unfortunately had another commitment, so she sent in a video that we're going to be queuing in and doing a screen share. So give us just a moment to do that. Stay tuned.
Hello, my name is Sadiqa Johnson, and I am the author of The House of Eve. The House of Eve was inspired by thoughts of my grandmother. I always looked at my maternal grandmother and my mother's relationship as sort of turbulent, and I couldn't really put my finger on why it was like that. Well, the story is that my grandmother got pregnant out of wedlock with my mother at age 14. And she had my mother at 15. And to have a baby in 1955 without a husband brought all kinds of shame on the family. So she hid the pregnancy and she hid the birth of her child from everyone. My grandmother would give my mother to her mother. And my mother said that she didn't know that my grandmother was her actual mother until she was in the 3rd grade, because it was so much shame and secrecy around her birth. And it just really got me to thinking about families and about women and sexuality and giving birth and what that looked like. So I started to sort of research this idea, and I came upon the houses for unwed mothers. And these were facilities that were largely in part to house women who were pregnant out of wedlock, and they were used as places to sort of force the women to give up their babies. Between 1941 and 1975, over 1.5 million women went into these homes for unwed mothers, and they were forced to give up their children. And so that was sort of the beginning of how the House of Eve started to come together. It was a mix of my own family history and wanting to know how things would be different for my own grandmother if she had had the chance to go into a home and give up her child. Would she then be able to be educated? You know, would she have a different life than she ended up having? I mean, I wouldn't have been here if that happened, but that curiosity, that question of why, was really what drove the story. I just also thought it would be nice to just show you a picture of my maternal grandmother. She has since passed on, but this is the woman who inspired the story. The House of Eve is a book that is near and dear to my heart. It weaves family stories. It weaves the stories of women who I think have been largely erased. You know, there's not a lot of books written about these women who spent their lives in these homes for unwed mothers and the atrocities that they faced being stripped of their children. And most often, you know, it was without their permission. And so my goal as a writer is to always shine a light in those dark spaces in history where we often don't usually go, and those voices have been largely forgotten. And I hope that with the House of Eve, I have brought to light the stories of women, the stories of classism and colorism and socioeconomics, and what it means to be a woman in this country in the 1940s and the 1950s. So thank you so much for helping me with the mission of getting the House of Eve in the hands of eager readers and getting this book as far as it could possibly go. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
And thank you, Siddiqa, for sending in that recording. I can attest to this. I finished reading this book. It's incredible. And you will love meeting Siddiqa. She has a perpetual smile on her face. She's charming. She's delightful. She's brilliant. And for those of you who are in or near San Diego, on February 24th, you have the opportunity to go to our luncheon with her at the Southwestern Yacht Club, February 24th. It's a Friday afternoon. Visit our website and get your tickets and meet Siddiqa in person and bring your book club. You won't regret it. Thank you. So next up, next up we have Greta Kelly. Greta is probably not a witch in death or otherwise, but she can be still summoned with offerings of 2 beautiful to use journals and Butterfingers candy. I love Butterfingers. She currently lives in Wisconsin with her husband, EJ, daughters Lorelai and Nadia, who are doing their level best to take over the world. Greta's novels include The Frozen Crown, its sequel, The Seventh Queen, and The Queen of Days. We can't wait to hear more. Welcome, Greta.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, like Susan said, I am Greta Kelly. I am the author of the critically acclaimed high fantasy warrior witch series. And I'm here to talk to you all about my newest book, The Queen of Days. So it's completely separate from my first series. So don't worry, there's no reading homework you need to do to prepare for this one. And if you're new to fantasy, don't worry, this isn't some hard to follow doorstopper of a novel. The Queen of Days is a fast-paced gunpowder fantasy adventure about Balthazar and a band of thieves called the Talion. Now, Bal hasn't been home since the uprising that killed his parents and busted him down from blue blood to beggar in 24 hours flat. But when he's offered a job to steal an ancient statue from his city's governor, he jumps at the chance. The payout alone will set Bal and his kid sister Mira up for life. And humiliating the governor, the man responsible for his parents' murder, well, that's just icing on the cake. But the job won't be an easy one. Bal will have to steal the statue during a ceremony which consecrates the city to their dark god Karanis, which means it'll be under heavy guard, not to mention surrounded by hundreds of priests, worshipers, and snobby noble jerks. Oh, sorry, my watch. It's a job that will require finesse and exacting precision. It's too bad Bal's crew is about as subtle as a hand grenade, which is why he hired the Queen of Days. This time-eating demon is known as the weapon of last resort, the patron saint of people with nothing left to lose. But not even she can stop the heist from going 6 kinds of sideways. Not only does the governor summon Karanis himself into the city, the statue breaks, and now half of it is missing. And if Bal doesn't deliver it, Karanis is going to kill his little sister. If Bal has any hope of saving Mira or cashing in on the reward, he'll have to recover the missing chunk of statue, take out a fallen god, and save the city. No problem. Probably. Okay, it's definitely a problem, but it's a good thing he's got the Talion by his side and the Queen of Days at his back. They may not be the heroes that anyone would have called on or asked for, or even really wanted, but they're here, so just deal with it. The Queen of Days is an irreverent heist and hijinks fantasy adventure, perfect for people who loved movies and TV shows like Firefly or Ocean's 11, or books like Six of Crows or The Lies of Locke Lamora, or The Black Tongue Thief, which I just read and absolutely loved, or even Among Thieves. The cover has not been released just yet, but I do have some never before seen character artwork that I can show you all, starting with the Queen of Days herself and all of her spooky glory. I loved writing this character. She is a demon with a heart of gold, if that's possible. And she was so unintentionally funny that she was really just a joy to write. I also have some artwork coming by the amazing artist, Alice Maria Powers. And it's not colored yet, but this kind of gives you an idea of the gang. I love the Usual Suspects vibe that this print is going to give off. I can't wait to see the colored version. Yeah, so I have all kinds of really spectacular pre-order incentives planned for this book, including how you can get some of this artwork that I just showed you. So keep an eye out on my social media feeds and keep your receipts if you end up pre-ordering the book. There will be ways for you to get this awesome artwork, don't worry. As I mentioned, social media, I am available on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Greta K. Kelly. And of course, I'm available to meet with your book clubs. If you guys want a different change of pace, my other 2 books are out right now. Queen of Days is coming out in October. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Greta. Sounds juicy. I love it. Okay, next up, we have Martha Hall Kelly. Her debut novel, Lilac Girls, became a New York Times bestseller the week it was published in 2016 and went on to sell over 2 million copies published in 50 countries. Crazy. Martha followed Lilac Girls and Lost Roses, with Lost Roses about Carolyn's mother and Sunflower Sisters about Carolyn's great-grandmother, which also became an instant New York Times bestseller. In her newest novel, The Golden Doves, 2 former female spies bound together by their past risked everything to hunt down an infamous Nazi doctor in the aftermath of World War II. My gosh, your books are so good, Martha. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Susan. It's so fun to be here with all these great authors. I feel like we're all in the same room, which is super fun. So my book is The Golden Doves. And for people that haven't read Lilac Girls, it's probably smart to give you a quick synopsis of what happens in Lilac Girls. That was my debut novel that came out in 2016. And I didn't think anyone would read that book. I really was so shocked when it got on the list and all of that happened. But I just had found out this true story about this woman in Connecticut that brought 54 concentration camp survivors, Polish women that had been experimented on at Ravensbrück concentration camp. She brought them to the US for rehabilitation. And I told that story with 3 point of view characters, one of which was Herta Oberhauser, one of the Nazi doctors that experimented on the women. And so after Lilac Girls, I wrote more about Caroline Faraday's family and went back in time. And so now Golden Doves is going back to World War II. And it's not connected to the other 3 books, but there are some cameos of some of the characters. It's a bit of a spoiler, but people like Herta Oberhauser and Dorothea Binns, if you've read Lilac Girls, make an appearance. Not mostly Nazis carried over from the other book. But in this book, it's also different because I have 2 point of view characters. My agent wouldn't let me write with 3 point of view characters because she said I was in this habit and I had to break the habit. And I'm glad I did, because it makes this book very different. And it's also, Lisa Scartolini emailed me after she read it and said, "My dear, you have written a thriller." And I was like, what? I mean, I tried to make it exciting, but yeah, so apparently it's a thriller. But it has 2 point of view characters. And one is Josie Anderson. She's an American that is imprisoned at Ravensbrück. And also this with the beret, some cover artists imagining how Arlette LaRue is. And these 2 women become best friends. I'm always writing about best friends. For some reason, I'm not quite sure. I lost my own best friend when we were 16. So I think I think that's partly why I keep writing about best friends. But Josie Anderson is the American. And weirdly, there were several Americans at Ravensbrück. One lived in California and got out early, but had become friends with the so-called rabbits in Lilac Girls. And so I thought, wouldn't that be interesting to write from the point of view of one of the Americans at Ravensbrück? So that's Josie. Her father is an ambassador, and they get stuck in Paris without their father. He is Episcopalian, and her mother is Jewish. So she and her mother and her grandmother are stuck in Paris, in Nazi-occupied Paris. And but she is a genius and hooks up with the underground and starts transmitting radio about radio signals about what's happening with the Nazis, and they can't figure out where it's coming from. And then she gets connected to Arlette Leroux, a French woman who lives on the border of Alsace, or lived when she was growing up. So she's part German and part French. And she has a relationship with a German boy and becomes pregnant and has a baby named Willie, the love of her life. And she ends up in Paris through some spoilery kind of things that I can't tell you about, but she ends up in Paris and with her little boy, who's a baby at the time, and becomes friends with Josie. And the two of them become the Golden Doves. And they do so many things to the Nazis that the Nazis put a price on their head. And a lot of this is spoilery, so I can't really get into it too much, but they end up getting arrested and going to Ravensbrück. The actual story opens 7 years later when Josie is in Fort Bliss, Texas, working for Army intelligence, bringing Nazis to this country to work in top secret programs. And she keeps looking for this bad doctor, Dr. Snow, who did terrible things to them at Ravensbrück. And she's offered the chance to go find him, and she accepts. And she goes all over the world trying to trace down the Nazi rat line, how these people escaped justice and came to South America and other places. Meanwhile, Arlette has lost her son at Ravensbrück, and she works at a cafe in Paris. And one day a mysterious man comes to her and says, "Would you like to find your son? I think I know where he is." And so she has to decide, is she going to pursue that? So so that's the story. And the two of it's like Thelma and Louise meets Da Vinci Code. And the two of them eventually meet up and they track down Snow, or they try to. I can't really tell you what happens. But yeah,
Readers are in for a treat for sure.
that is the story of the Golden Doves.
Thank you, Martha. And Martha and I had fun with Jennifer Coburn in San Diego last year.
Oh my God.
Here on book tour, and we ran all around the Hotel del Coronado taking promotional photos and videos and had a blast. And we actually sat out on the patio by the water watching the sunset, and our server was so thrilled to find out who she was serving. We tipped her with an autographed copy of Martha's book, and I think
oh my God, I forgot about that.
Yeah, that was the best tip
fun.
she ever got. And for those of you who want to see, yes. And for those of you who want to see Martha again, we just put this on our website. It's not even really official yet, but on March 7th, we are doing a big virtual event. And for those of you who are friends in fiction or Kristen Harmel fans, and she has made this public, so I'm not divulging any secret information, but she's been recently diagnosed with breast cancer. She's young 40s, no family history, a young son. And she was able to detect it because she got an early mammogram. And she is undergoing chemo as we speak. And her primary mission, even though she is miserable, is to spread the word about breast cancer awareness, early detection. And so we're doing a big fundraising event in her honor, March 7th on Zoom. You can visit our website. Martha Hall Kelly is one of the over 25 authors who will be appearing at that event. We're going to raise funds for the Susan G. Komen Foundation. We are going to support Kristen. Her next book comes out in June, and she's probably not going to be able to go on book tour. So we want to help her with book sales. We're going to be pre-selling the book, donating 20% of all the proceeds to the Susan G. Komen Foundation. But you can go to our website, adventuresbythebook.com, to find out more. But thank you, Martha, for agreeing to participate. It's going to be a really meaningful event.
Amazing. Thank you,
Thank
Susan.
you. Next up is Eliza Knight, an award-winning and USA Today bestselling author. She is the creator of the popular historical blog, History Undressed, I love that name, and a co-host on the History, Books, and Wine podcast. Her latest book, starring Adele Astaire, a story full of glitz and glam, delves into the life of Adele Astaire, a spirited and talented woman who served up smiles and love both on and off the stage, with and without her also famous brother, Fred Astaire, along with a determined young dancer with rags to riches dreams. Welcome, Eliza.
Hello, thank you so much for having me here. It's exciting to be here with all these awesome authors. So this is my book starring Adele Astaire. I don't know if you could see the cover, the glare is a little bit not great. But on the cover is a picture, an actual promotion picture from a performance of Adele and Fred in the early 20s when they were dancing together. So this story has a kind of a fun background of how I discovered Adele. I was actually doing research on Nancy Mitford for my last book, The Mayfair Bookshop, that came out last year. And I was reading a letter, and Nancy wrote her sister something really funny in the letter. And I'm gonna tweak one of the words, which is the F word, and I'm not gonna say that on here, I'm just gonna say F word. But in the letter, she said, Deli said, I don't mind going off and F-wording, but I do object to all this free love. She is heaven, isn't she? And I had no idea who this Deli person was. So I went down the page to where they do the footnotes and they tell you who it is. And it said Adele Astaire. So I was immediately intrigued and had to find out who Adele Astaire was, because I had heard of Fred Astaire, but I didn't know he had a sister. And as it turns out, in the early 20s and before that, when they started dancing as children, Adele was actually the more famous of the two siblings. And it was funny, there was some reviews that would say like, Adele dances like a lilac flame, and I guess her brother's okay, which is hilarious for all of us because we know Fred Astaire is this amazing dancer who went on to have an amazing career in film with Ginger Rogers. So was the reason that his sister didn't dance with him. She ended up in the 1930s falling in love with a lord, son of a duke, and deciding that she was going to retire from dancing. So I just had to explore her story. And I think that you guys are all going to enjoy the ups and downs and the interesting things that goes on in a dancer's life, but also the interesting things that went on in Adele's life. She really kind of took the bull by the horns when it came to anything. When she was a dancer, she was a full-on dancer. She did everything that she needed to for almost 30 years. And then she finally decided she needed to call it quits because she wanted to actually have a family. Sorry, this is my dog here clicking behind me. So, and then on the opposite side of the story, we have a fictional character named Violet Wood, who is also a dancer. And her story is a little bit more rags to riches. So I really wanted to explore the opposite side of the spectrum. So we have Adele, who's sort of at like the height of her career when she comes to London, and she meets this young girl who really wants to be a dancer. And Violet has been practicing on her own since she was a child, sneaking into little dance studios and sneaking into the back of theaters to watch people dance. And, you know, stealing shoes when she could, because she was extremely poor and she was not going to become a laundress like her mother. And she ends up befriending Adele during an audition, and they become friends. Which is a fictional friendship, but I love exploring friendship with women, so I wanted to do that. And I also wanted to kind of explore what it would be like to have someone having an up moment and someone having a down moment. So anytime Adele's having an up moment, Violet's having a down moment, and then they switch. And both of these women are visited by various tragedies that I'm not going to tell you about, some of which include World War II. And surprisingly, Adele was actually very involved in World War II. She did a lot of volunteering, including letting her castle in Ireland, where she lived part-time with her husband when they weren't in London, be used as a convalescent home for airmen who had been injured during the war. And then she also would dance with American soldiers and write letters home for them. Can you imagine if you were at home waiting for your son or your brother or your husband to come home and you get a letter from Adele Astaire that says, he's doing great, we're learning how to dance, everything's swell, love Adele. She was just really a very vibrant person, and I really admire her. And I just really wanted to like tell everyone her story and share her life because I just find her so fascinating. So I hope you like it. Oh, and it comes out June 6th. I don't know if I mentioned that. So this summer.
Great. Thank you, Eliza. And also for those who want to meet Eliza in person, she will be part of our Superbook team this year on February 16th in San Diego. Get your airline tickets now, get your tickets to the event now, or get a virtual event ticket now and meet her in person. Thanks so much, Eliza. Next up is Tosca Lee, the award-winning New York Times bestselling author of The Line Between, The Progeny, Firstborn, Iscariot, The Legend of Sheba, Demon, a Memoir, Hava, The Story of Eve, and the Books of Mortal series with the New York Times bestseller, Ted Dekker. She is the recipient of 2 international book awards and the Nebraska Book Award. Inspired by true stories, The Long March Home, her new book, is a gripping World War II coming-of-age tale of friendship, sacrifice, and the power of unrelenting hope. Welcome, Tosca Lee.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Susan, Debbie, and Amber for holding this event and inviting me to join you tonight. So here's there's the glare. There's the glare. There's The Long March Home right there. This comes out May 2nd, and this is written with a friend of mine, Marcus Brotherton. He's a New York Times bestseller, well known for his World War II biographies. And I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but this cover has a really cool back. This is an arc, so it's not on there, but the back shows, nope, you can't see it. Okay, never mind. Nope, never mind. Okay. Well, if you look on my Facebook page, you might be able to see it. I'm in love with this cover. So a little bit about the book. The Long March Home is a story of 3 best friends, Jimmy, Hank, and Billy, and the girl that they left behind, who is on the back cover that we can't see. It's 1941 when the 3 friends enlist in the army and ship out to the Philippines. And for Jimmy, it's a chance to start over and forget the girl he left behind, his high school sweetheart, who also happens to be Billy's older sister, Claire. And for the boys, life in Manila seems like paradise until the morning of December 8th, when news arrives from Manila that Imperial Japan has bombed Pearl Harbor. And within hours, Japan attacks the Philippines, and the 3 friends are immediately thrown into war. This is a war for the control of the Pacific Theater. And this war will culminate in a desperate, hungry, starving, disease-ridden last stand on the Bataan Peninsula, and end with the largest surrender of American troops in history. And what follows is a chapter of history that I didn't know about before my co-author Marcus approached me about writing this book. And that is called it's the atrocity known as the Bataan Death March. And I hadn't heard of it before. And it was illuminating and horrifying to learn about. And so what happens is, with no hope of rescue, these 3 friends vow to make it back home together. But this is unfortunately just the beginning of their nearly 4-year fight to survive the unsurvivable. So this novel is inspired by true stories. It's a story of friendship, sacrifice, and those relationships that sustain us. It includes a dual timeline, because as he's trying to survive all these horrible things that are happening to them, Jimmy is reliving his friendship and romance with Claire, which helps sustain him through the fight to survive, and also takes us through the events that led to the boys' decision to enlist and Jimmy's personal decision to leave home. And so it's a story filled with heroism and nostalgia, but most importantly, hope. And I have to say, I love all of my novels, and it's important to me, first and foremost, to transport and inspire my readers with each one. But it's been a true honor to write this novel inspired by real stories, and to shine a light on these heroes of Bataan. So this book comes out May 2nd, and I'm really excited about this pre-order offer that our publisher has made available at thelongmarchhomebook.com. Anybody who pre-orders the book can have the audiobook free, and also the secret epilogue, which I adored writing, but it is not in the book. So it is only for those who pre-order it. Also, I love book clubs. If you live near me, I live in Nebraska, so you may not live near me, but if you do, please invite me, because book clubs have the best food and the best snacks. And if I can't get there in person, I would love to join you virtually, and I'll send you bookmarks and signed book plates and goodies ahead of time. But of course, I would love to be there in person if I could and eat all your food. So that's The Long March Home, and I'm really excited about this, and can't wait to share this story of 3 best friends with the world.
Thank you, Tosca. And I know Tosca's going to be in San Diego for BoucherCon this year. So we're talking about doing something fun while she's here. So put that on your calendar. Thank you. Next up is Susan Meisner, the USA Today best-selling author of historical fiction with more than 750,000 books in print and translation in 18 languages. She's an author, speaker, writing workshop leader with a background in community journalism. Her new book, Only the Beautiful, is a heartrending story with a young mother's fight to keep her daughter and the winds of fortune that tear them apart. Hi, Susan. Nice to see you again. Just need to unmute yourself.
Can't believe I did that after all the Zooming we did over the last couple of years. Thanks again for having me. It's always a pleasure to do an Adventure by the Book event. So I'm really, really happy to be here with all of you. Yeah, Only the Beautiful comes out April 18. It's a book that took me to the mat to write. I had to begin it like 3 times and restructure it a couple of times too, but I'm really happy with the finished product. It just got a starred review from Publishers Weekly and Library Journal, and it's always wonderful to please your peers. I'm just so very, very grateful for that critical acclaim. And I hope it means that you're in for not just a treat as a reader, but I think when I'm able to write a book that book clubs like, I feel like I've met my purpose. And that is, I really want to write books that people want to talk about that make you think after you've read it. So I hope you'll find that it's a good book club choice for you. The cover is absolutely gorgeous. I have nothing to do with these covers. I just have an amazing designer at Berkeley. Her name is Colleen Reinhardt, and she is amazing. And what I like about this cover is that it's got this beautiful floral border around it, and these mothers and children dancing in this very lighthearted, idyllic moment. But that tobacco sky, to me, tells you that there's something wrong with this, because the title says Only the Beautiful. And that right there tells you that there is somebody deciding who is beautiful and who isn't. The book is about a long forgotten movement that was very popular in the beginning of the 20th century. It was called the eugenics movement. I really didn't know what it was. I stumbled across it when I was researching The Nature of Fragile Things, which is a book about the 1906 San Francisco earthquake. And after the earthquake, San Francisco hosted the World's Fair in 1915, only 9 years later, and built these beautiful buildings to have the exhibition. And one of the exhibitors was this eugenics society. And I saw the picture and I thought, what is that? And I did the dive that sometimes results in a book, which is the case with this. And the eugenics movement was this idea, and it was purported by sociologists and anthropologists and teachers and biologists and politicians, that if we just improve the gene pool, if we just had happier, healthier, more beautiful children, we can eliminate criminality and poverty and indigence and all the societal ills that we don't like. So they started encouraging happily married, beautiful couples to have children, and they didn't want a certain kind of person to have children. And so what they started doing was sterilizing people without their knowledge, without their consent, in state institutions. And so there was this body of people deciding who had value and who didn't. And it was the early 1910s and 20s when this was happening. And you can imagine there was a certain man in Europe who thought this idea was just wonderful. It was Adolf Hitler. And he wanted to know how he came up with all this information about eugenics and the eugenic thinking. And he even invited one of our eugenic leaders over to Germany to talk about it. And then he took that idea, and you know where he went with it, to the absolute worst zenith you can imagine. Here in the United States, we did not do the things he did, but the idea was the same, that some people are worth having life and some aren't. And so in California, my home state, they sterilized more people than any other state. And so I set the story in California for the half of the story that is about one of the 2 women in the book. She's young, she's 17, she's an orphan, she's pregnant, and she has a sensory anomaly called synesthesia, which is going to spell doom for her. And it's pretty much all I can tell you about her. Her name is Rosie. And she is befriended by a woman who is an expat. She's a nanny living in Nazi-occupied Vienna and is taking care of a disabled child. And you may not know this about Adolf Hitler, but after he sterilized people whom he didn't want having children, he started rounding up sick people, disabled children, and he killed them. And this is before he set up any of those concentration camps. These are the first things he did. And so the book is about this ideology that some people can decide who is precious and who is valuable and who is not. And it's a little shocking, a little appalling, but I do want you to know that I don't leave you without hope. It's also a book about mother love and the value of human life. And I think it really is a book that we can discuss about like just how we treat people and how we assign value to people, and should we even be thinking about who has value and who doesn't. So I hope you find that it's a discussable book. I'm available for online visits. I live almost in Canada now, up in the northern part of Washington State, but I'm always available for book club visits virtually. I usually have some photos to show you. And it's my pleasure really to visit with book clubs. You guys are the reason that I write. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Susan. And we miss you here in San Diego, but she will be back February 16th for Superbook. I think she's been to every Superbook event we've had all 4 years, and we love her. So we can't wait for you to come back. And again, you can get your ticket on adventuresbythebook.com, virtual or in person. We'd love to see you in person, but we understand that some of you can't. And also, Susan's going to be part of our Reading Between the Vines book and wine pairing series. You won't find that on our website yet. We're hoping to have that live next week. Just waiting for a few details from the winery, but you can check her out in Sonoma County or in San Diego or virtually. Thank you, Susan. Next up, Jan Moran, an 8-time USA Today and 2-time Wall Street Journal bestselling author of heartwarming fiction, including the feel-good contemporary beach series of Summer Beach, Coral Cottage, and Love, California. What could possibly go wrong at a family reunion? At the Sea Breeze Inn, you never know. Discover the latest chapter in the Summer Beach series with Jan's newest book, Sea Breeze Reunion, set on sunny California shores, and find out why readers say life is better in Summer Beach. Welcome, Jan.
Oh, thank you, Susan. I really appreciate being here. Thanks to you and Novel Network and Adventures by the Book. This is my 25th novel. And I've written other historical sagas, including The Chocolatier, which is always a popular one around Valentine's Day, Hepburn's Necklace, which is another one of my historical sagas. And this one starts on the shores of, it's on the shores of Lake Como, but it begins on the set of Roman Holiday with Audrey Hepburn. And the one that we're talking about today, of course, is Sea Breeze Reunion. That one is a ray of sunshine. My Summer Beach series has been very popular. It's reached 1 million units now, and it's really a fun, feel-good series that took off during the pandemic and is continuing. That's book number 8 right now. So the Sea Breeze series, or the Summer Beach series, begins with 2 sisters, Ivy Bay and Shelley Bay, her sort of quirky sister. And Ivy finds herself in Boston, suddenly widowed. Her husband passed away unexpectedly, and she has 2 daughters in college that she needs to provide for. But there's a kink in this, and that is that the retirement savings that she and her husband had been tucking away, upon the reading of the will, she finds that it's missing, it's disappeared. What surfaces in its place, of course, is an old house that he had purchased, unbeknownst to her, for another woman in his life. And so she goes to California to sell this old grande dame of a house. It was designed by Julia Morgan, actually, who was the first licensed female architect in the state of California. So one thing that I like to do is to weave in historical details even into my contemporary books, because I just love history. And I think it adds to the richness of the stories too. So in the Summer Beach series, Ivy Bay is, the house is another character in the series, really. And it holds secrets such as, we've located some of Hitler's degenerate art, which disappeared during World War II. We've also located some crown jewels, which were stolen, believe it or not, by some U.S. servicemen in Germany. So I bring in a lot of those rich details that often send readers Googling to find out, is this real? And they're delighted when they find out that it is. So I don't have to go far for inspiration. I live in San Diego, near the beach of Del Mar. So I'm often going there and just dreaming up new stories, doing a little research. I found all sorts of things on the beach, including in my last book, it was a dredge, an old gambling casino, a barge that they had put off of the coast of California during not during World War II, during Prohibition. And of course, there was a lot of gambling and drinking and all sorts of wild things going on. So one of those surfaced in one of the books as well. As for Seabreeze Reunion, well, as you might imagine, that one is very family oriented. And the sister, Shelley, had her DNA analyzed as the book opens. And as you might imagine, a new branch of the family emerges. So I won't spoil the surprise there. But the Seabreeze Inn and the Summer Beach books are feel-good sagas that cover themes of resilience, friendship, and as always, creative solutions to problems. At their heart, they're feel-good escapism, the sort of books that you can read any time of year or anytime you'd like to get away to warmer climes. And I'm happy to speak with book clubs and libraries about the Beach series, as well as my historical sagas. And those are standalone books that deal with many women's issues of the 20th century. And my books are available in various forms, including audiobooks and large prints. And for more details, of course, you can find me on Novel Network and also at janmoran.com. And if you live in the San Diego area, I'm happy to drop by as well. Many book clubs have themed events. So I can't tell you how much chocolate I have eaten at some of these book clubs. And it is my pleasure. Someone has to do it. So between the chocolatier, the winemakers, and of course, Hepburn's Necklace with the Audrey Hepburn theme, there's no shortage of fun themes for book clubs. Thank you.
Your books always do make us feel good, Jan. Thank you. Next up is Alex Rickloff, critically acclaimed author of historical fiction, whose family tree includes a knight who fought during the War of the Roses and a soldier who sided with Charles I during the English Civil War. With inspiration like that, what else could she do but start writing her own series? Her latest novel, The Girls in Navy Blue, is a gripping and compelling dual timeline story about three women who joined the Navy during World War I to become yeomanites and the impact their choices have on one of their descendants in 1968. Tell us more, Alex.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me tonight, Debbie and Susan, for inviting me to participate, and all of you fabulous readers who have tuned in this evening. The Girls in Navy Blue, which released at the beginning of November, is my third historical fiction novel. The book is based around the history of the World War I yeomanettes, who were the first class of women to join the military in a non-nursing role. So the actual storyline of the book cuts back and forth between 1968 and 1918. So in 1968, my character Peggy, who's been reeling from some personal tragedies, unexpectedly inherits a beach cottage from her great aunt. This is a woman she has never met. So as she's working to both fix the cottage up and put her life back together, she begins to receive these mysterious postcards that are dated from 1918. They're addressed to her great aunt Blanche from someone named Viv. So these lead her to begin to uncover her aunt's past during the war and this friendship between these three young women who lived in the cottage during World War I. The second storyline is set in 1918 and introduces us to these three yeomanettes. Blanche, who is a wealthy suffragette and is determined to prove herself the equal of any man. German-American Marjorie, who has enlisted to prove her patriotism to an increasingly hostile country, and Viv, who's actually in hiding and on the run from the police. So as the war comes to its climax over the summer and fall of 1918, these three young women forge this incredible friendship that is threatened when Viv's past comes back to haunt them. So I was thrilled when Library Journal called the novel extraordinary, and Booklist described it as a tale of women coming into their own, which was I was so excited when I saw that, because this was exactly what I was going for. I wrote this book very much as a tribute, as a story to honor this amazing group of women who did so much to further the cause of equal rights and women's suffrage, but who really have been forgotten over the past century. I happened on the story, a little backstory. I happened on this, the story of the Yeomanettes, very much by chance, as I was reading an article on Joy Bright Hancock, who was this amazing figure in the U.S. Navy. She she joined the Waves in 1942, rose through the ranks, ended up leading the program and leading the transition of women into the regular Navy. But the article talked about how she got her start as a yeomanette in 1917. And this was a term I'd never heard before. I'd never heard of these women. So I was instantly sucked in by the idea. And the more I read, the more I was inspired by the nearly 12,000 women who enlisted in the Navy. They did this mainly as in secretarial roles, but they were quickly, their roles quickly expanded. They did things as they were truck drivers and switchboard operators and code breakers and mechanics. And camouflage experts. They worked in munitions factories, they worked in shipyards, they worked in military intelligence. And in many cases, they did their jobs as well as, if not better than, the men they replaced. So by the time the last yeomanette left her post in 1920, these women's wartime service had really begun to change America's view of what women could do and what they should be able to do, and really paved the way for the passage of the 19th Amendment. So if you like historical fiction, which I imagine you do since you've tuned in to all these amazing authors and all their books, if you like stories based around World War I, if you like stories that involve family secrets, strong women, the bonds of friendship and sisterhood, if you like a little romance in your books, if you like a little mystery in your books, if you like books that deal with starting over and second chances, and of course, if you love books that are set in beachfront cottages, then I think you should definitely consider The Girls in Navy Blue for your next book club read. It's available in print and ebook and audio. And of course, like all the other wonderful authors here, I am available for book club visits, either through Novel Network. You can reach me through their portal, or you can reach me through the link to them on my own website at alexrickloff.com. So I hope I get to see and talk to a lot of you very soon. Thank you for tuning in tonight. Thanks.
Thank you, Alex. And just a reminder, I hope you're all fast and furiously jotting notes on the cheat sheet that our team prepared for you. Make sure you check which ones you want to read, which ones you want to recommend to your book clubs, to your library, and even which ones you want to purchase. We will send you an autographed copy or a signed bookplate with your copy. And also, somebody asked if you order 5 books for your book club. Yes, we do honor the 20% discount, but we will also offer a 20% discount if you purchase 5 different books from different authors as well. So make sure to send that to us or call us after the event, or email Amber events@adventuresbythebook.com, and she can help you with that. Thank you, Alex. Next up is Renee Rosen from the Windy City, USA Today best-selling author, whose novels include Park Avenue Summer, Windy City Blues, White Collar Girl, What the Lady Wants, and Dollface, as well as the young adult novel Every Crooked Pot. In her dazzling new novel, Fifth Avenue Glamour Girl, it's 1938, and a young woman selling face cream out of a New York City beauty parlor is determined to prove that she can have it all. Her name, Estee Lauder, and she's about to take the world by storm, and I suspect so is Renee Rosen. Welcome, Renee.
Thanks. It's so good to be here. My to be read pile has already just grown in the last hour or so. So this is my new book, Fifth Avenue Glamour Girl. It comes out April 25th, and it's the story of Estee Lauder, and it covers all her trials and tribulations as she works her way up in the beauty industry. And Esty was a really ambitious woman, and she had a lot of really, really guarded secrets. And I reveal them in here. I also will share some stories and secrets about the makeup industry itself, including some of the crazy ingredients that went into cosmetics back in the day. This includes mercury, snail slime, bat excrement, all kinds of wonderful things like that. So the book opens in the late 1930s, in the height of the Depression, where a young Estee Lauder is making face creams and lotions in her kitchen in her Upper West Side apartment. And then she packages them up and she goes to beauty parlors and tries to sell them. And it's in one of these beauty parlors that she meets the fictional Gloria Downing and befriends her. Now, Gloria has been, she's in desperate need of a makeover after her father has created a public scandal that's made front page news. And I'm sorry, I'm just checking my notes here to make sure I don't forget anything. She has been compared to Alexis on Schitt's Creek, if anybody's been following that series. She's a rich, spoiled girl that once you take away her privilege and her wealth, she's completely lost. But she doesn't stay that way for long. She ends up getting a job at Saks Fifth Avenue in their makeup department. And she proves to be very instrumental in Estee's rise to the top of the industry. And their friendship is really at the heart of this novel. And it's not so much that they're frenemies, but they do have a very complicated and complex relationship. They lean on each other through all the ups and downs of Estee's marriage, of her challenge trying to break into an industry that at that time was really dominated by people like Helena Rubinstein, Elizabeth Arden, Charles Revson, who was the head of Revlon. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere comes Estee Lauder. And Estee really felt that it was her mission to make all women beautiful. She thought there was no excuse for a woman not looking her absolute best. In fact, she would say, there are no homely women, just lazy ones. She would go up to complete strangers on the street and tell them, you're wearing the wrong lipstick shade, that eyeshadow is not good for you, your skin's looking kind of dry, you need some moisturizer. And she never went anywhere without her products. She always gave out samples to people. In fact, if you're familiar with gift with purchase, that was Estee's invention. She started that. Now it's pretty much a staple of the makeup industry. So some of her approaches may have been a little bit unconventional, and she may have been a little brash, but she was really determined. And I think her ingenuity and her story will just be such an inspiration to anyone who has a dream that they want to see happen for themselves. So Estee and Gloria are the two main characters in the book, but I do want to introduce you to some of the other people that you'll meet in Fifth Avenue Glamour Girl. So there is Uncle John, who was Estee's uncle and her inspiration. He taught her everything she knew. She would say that he was a renowned European skincare specialist, although he made things like poultry lice killer and embalming fluid and Hungarian mustache wax. So I'll let you guys decide. There's also Bobby Kerner, who is a banana artist. She makes this really incredible artwork out of banana peels. And she ends up selling her artwork to Helena Rubinstein, who was an avid art collector. There's also a bunch of quirky characters that are at the cosmetic counter at Saks Fifth Avenue, as well as some of the customers, including a kleptomaniac. There's Sylvia and Richard Miller. They're an old vaudevillian couple. And there's lots of juicy stuff in here for us to talk about. So I really hope I have an opportunity to meet with your book club and we can dig into Fifth Avenue Glamour Girl. Thanks.
Thank you, Renee. I hope so too. And for those of you who want to meet Renee in person, She's going to be one of our 8 authors in Sonoma on April 30th. We're doing wine and book pairings, 8 authors and their books matched with 8 wines, 8 charcuterie boards. It's going to be amazing. So come join us there. Rebecca Rosenberg, you're up next. She's the award-winning author of Champagne Widows, winner of the 2022 Editor's Choice Historical Novel Society. The second in the Champagne Widows saga is Madame Pommery, set in France, 1860. With the surprise of a newborn at age 40, Madame Pommery, set in France, 1860, is suddenly widowed and must support her family. With no experience, she starts a champagne house and invents brut champagne, breaking society and patriarchal rules. She takes over the city dump and builds the most spectacular castle winery in the world and a world-class champagne empire. Can't wait to hear more, Rebecca. Welcome.
Yes, everybody. It's getting late. I hope you have a little glass of something. So I'm so excited to share my novel, Madame Pommery, the creator of Brut Champagne, and it's part of my Champagne Widows novels, although each one is a standalone. And they're about the 3 widows that lived in beautiful Champagne, France, and actually created champagne and revolutionized what we know of as champagne today. And this one is Lily Bollinger. I have a show and tell, which no one did, so stick with me here. We've got Lily Bollinger, we have Veuve Clicquot, which is that beautiful orange bottle that you've seen. And then we have Madame Pommery. So these 3 women really made champagne. And they all lived in the beautiful Champagne region, which looks very much like Sonoma. And I'm really excited that you're all coming here for events. That'll be a lot of fun. So they all lived here and they were very inspired to create champagne. So my first novel, which is the Champagne Widows, the first one, is about Veuve Clicquot, the first woman who created champagne in 1800s, and she battled pandemics and mental illness with her family and 15 years of Napoleon's wars. He was trying to take over Europe and Napoleon himself to forge her champagne empire. And today you can download this free. We arranged that to happen just for this event. So you can download it from Amazon today and you'll come up to speed on the whole Champagne Widows saga. So back to Madame Pommery. Madame Pommery, look at this beautiful woman, was quite different than Veuve Clicquot, and she lived 50 years later, although she knew Veuve Clicquot. And she was widowed at 40 years old. And strangely, she had a 2-year-old and she had a 17-year-old son who was in law school. So she had to support them, but she did not want to take over her husband's wool business. She wanted to make champagne, which was totally crazy because champagne is extremely difficult to make. It's at least twice as difficult as wine. And she had no help from the men who were running the whole champagne industry. But she prayed to her smiling angel. And I actually took this picture at the Reims Cathedral. And she would pray every day to this beautiful smiling angel for her to help her to make champagne. So she did. She started making champagne the old-fashioned way, picking the grapes by hand and stomping the grapes in the barrel and fermenting the grapes. So this is all a story of learning how to make champagne. And she did that with the help of this man, who is Henry Vesnier. And when she met him, he was 20 years her junior. And so he was like an apprentice to her and an assistant, and he helped her along the way. But soon they had a whole wonderful factory of men making champagne. But the problem was in 1870, the Prussians actually goaded Napoleon III into a war, and he conscripted all these men out of the winery, and she was left alone making champagne. So she had to teach the women, the war widows of the city, to help her make it. And then this man, who is Frederick Franz, and he is the Prussian general, actually took over France. And what did he do? Live in Madame Pomeroy's home. And so she had to deal with him underfoot. And she secretly, this is so exciting, she secretly excavated caves under the city dump to hide all of her champagne. And so this is a picture of those 16 kilometers of caves under the city dump. And not only did she put her champagne there, but she let the French resistance to the Prussians use this as their headquarters. And it was all secret under their noses.
And Rebecca, to learn more, they're going to have to schedule a visit with you because we're out of time.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you. And be sure and download Champagne Widows.
Absolutely.
Today.
And
Thank
also, we could not invite Rebecca to our wine and book pairing event in Sonoma on April 30th. So she'll be there in Sonoma, and you'll get to meet her in person there. Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Next up is Kara Ruda. And I know this is running long, and I appreciate your patience because we only have 4 or 5 more authors to go, and then we'll do our book prizes. And we thank you for staying with us to the end. Out of respect to the authors who, through no fault of their own, are at the end of our list alphabetically. So I appreciate your patience. Kara Ruda is a USA Today, Amazon charts, and international best-selling, multiple award-winning author of contemporary fiction that explores what goes on beneath the surface of seemingly perfect lives. Her domestic suspense novels include Best Day Ever, The Favorite Daughter, All the Difference, The Next Wife, and Somebody's Home. Her latest novel is The Widow Beneath the Surface, which will be out in September 2023. To date, her novels have been translated into more than 10 languages. Welcome, Kara.
Thank you, Susan. How are you? This has been fun. I feel a little bit out of place since this is all contemporary, you guys. So if you're all historical fiction fans, this probably won't appeal to you, but it's a fun story. It's set in contemporary times. It's The Widow, and I'm really happy to be here with you guys. I was learning so much from all of your presentations, so it's been really fun to listen. But anyway, okay, The Widow is a story about Jody and Martin Asher. They are the DC it couple on the Hill. This is my first book set in DC. My husband was a congressman, and so while he was there, I kind of stomped around and got ideas for story and setting. It's not based on him, though, promise. But anyway, so they are the it couple until Martin starts having a little fling, and Jody is not pleased because of all the things he could do. That is just not acceptable, and it's also a reputation killer. And so this weekend that you meet them, their daughter's getting married. She has everything planned for the perfect society wedding, and then Martin starts messing up. So anyway, Martin's secret affair is not the thing that bothers Jody personally, but professionally is going to be a problem. So when Martin suddenly dies, which happens in my books to men who aren't behaving well, Jody invokes what's called the widow's mandate, which is actually a true thing, where the way that most women have served in Congress historically, you historical fiction people would like this, is through a dead husband, because women, it was a lot easier to take over your husband's seat than get elected on your own right for too long in our history. So that, when I heard that tradition, and in the Senate, the governor usually appoints the widow, and in the Congress, there'll be a special election, and usually the widow will win because of the sympathy vote. When I heard that, I thought, well, that's a great tradition for a domestic suspense writer. So anyway, it's called The Widow. My name's Kara Ruda, and I'm on social media everywhere. And thank you, Susan and Debbie and everybody that's tuned in tonight. And that is it for me.
Thank you, Kara. And even though it's not historical fiction, I can attest to the fact that you will love her books and really enjoy them. So thanks for joining us today. Bryn Turnbull is joining us all the way from Toronto, Canada, a writer of historical fiction. She's equipped with a Master of Letters in Creative Writing from the University of St. Andrews and a bachelor's degree in English Literature from McGill University. As I mentioned, she lives in Toronto. She writes books intended to drive readers to similar levels of distraction. I love that, to transfer them into different areas in different worlds. In The Paris Deception, estranged sisters-in-law risk their lives rescuing looted masterpieces of modern art from Nazi destruction by replacing the originals with skillful forgeries. But when Hermann Goering's handpicked art dealer devises his own plan for the artwork, how can they stain their masterful illusion? Welcome, Bryn.
Hi, it's so nice to be here. It's so nice to see everybody. I don't know about you guys, but my TBR pile has just absolutely exploded over the course of the past hour and a bit. But I love it. So first of all, I don't actually have a galley to show you, but if you can see it, that's the cover of The Paris Deception. This is actually my first time talking about the book in front of an audience, so I'm especially excited to tell you about it. It came out of a challenge actually given to me by my brother. We were sitting up at my cottage one night with a bottle of wine, and he told me that he wanted me to write a book that was better than his favorite movie, which is The Thomas Crown Affair. So I took the idea of the Thomas Crown Affair art heist, added a few other twists and turns, including the Monuments Men, Champagne, Nazi Germany's degenerate art exhibition, the Jeu de Paume Museum, and the talents of a forger named Han van Meegeren. And all of that combined together into what became The Paris Deception. As Susan mentioned, it's the story of two women, sisters-in-law, at serious odds who risk their lives to rescue looted works of art from Nazi destruction. So first of all, I need to tell you about the Nazi notion of degenerate art. So in the 1930s, when Hitler, who was a failed artist himself, came to power, he outlawed what he termed degenerate art. So that is modern art, anything that really wasn't a literal representation of the world. So Cubism, Impressionism, collage, pointillism, essentially anything from 1910 onwards. In 1937, the Nazis hauled all of this so-called degenerate art out of public institutions in Germany, held an art exhibition showcasing how much they hated it, and then they piled it in front of the Reichstag in a bonfire and burned it all. We're talking millions of dollars worth of art, thousands of work of art, gone in the blink of an eye. And that is where our story begins. So Sophie, one of our two main characters, is an art conservator. She's watching the burning of this degenerate art outside the Reichstag in Berlin. Fast forward a couple of years, she's in Paris at the start of the German occupation. She's working in a small museum in the Jardin de Tuileries called the Jeu de Paume, which might be a name familiar to anybody who's watched the Monuments Men movie or knows anything about the Monuments Men. So alongside her friend and colleague Rose Valland, Sophie is seconded to a German art commission called the ERR to help them catalog and repair works of art left behind by families who fled France at the start of the conflict. Soon, however, Sophie realizes what the ERR is actually up to. They're stealing art collections from France's Jewish families and sending it back into Germany. Before long, she realizes that not only are they sending back classical artwork, but also that this modern artwork that none of the Nazis want, this is all being brought into the museum and it's under threat too. Recognizing that this art might meet the same fate as its counterparts in Germany, Sophie teams up with an unlikely ally, her estranged sister-in-law Fabienne, to replace these original modern artworks with clever forgeries and spirits them out of Paris. I mean, this sounds completely easy, right? Especially when forging artwork is incredibly difficult and oil paint takes years to dry. And the Nazis are bringing in art experts to the Jeu de Paume on a daily basis to look at all of this art and confirm its authenticity. And they're also not entirely sure where they're going to store these originals for the duration of the war. And it's particularly difficult when Hermann Goering's handpicked art dealer starts taking an interest in this modern degenerate collection. Then the question must be asked, of course, how long can our heroines maintain their masterful illusion? It's considered something of a rite of passage for historical fiction authors to write a Second World War book. And truth be told, I've been wanting to write about the Second World War since I was about in the 6th grade. So I'm so excited about this book. It's about redemption, love, resilience, and the importance of preserving the past in order to save the future. It comes out in May. I cannot wait to share it with you. I hope to chat with some of you in your book clubs, as I love meeting up with book clubs, either online or in person, depending on how close to Toronto you are. And also just FYI, Goodreads is giving away 10 advanced copies right now. So if you hop over to Goodreads, you can enter that for a chance to win. But yeah, I'm so excited to share it. And thank you so much for the opportunity to chat with you all.
And we were so excited to have you. Thank you, Brian. Wendy Walker up next is the author of the psychological suspense novels All Is Not Forgotten, Emma in the Night Before, Don't Look for Me, and American Girl. Her novels have been translated into 23 foreign languages, topped bestseller lists both nationally and abroad, and have been optioned for both television and film. In her book, What Remains, Detective Elise Sutton walks into a department store and is forced to make a terrible choice. To save one life, she will have to take another. Oh my gosh, Wendy, tell us more.
Okay, well, thank you all for being here. Thanks for having me. And I'm going to keep it as short as I can because I know everyone's had so much patience tonight. It's been wonderful. This is the book of, glare. Okay, What Remains. And so you've heard the setup. Cold case detective Elise Sutton. She's been 8 years working pretty much behind a desk with her partner, Rowan. He's an ex-Marine with PTSD. So he's kind of doing this job under, duress. He'd rather would be out doing something more, more active, but they're great friends. They're like family. She has 2 little daughters, a marriage that she's been, keeping together after some struggles over the years, and just living her life. And one day she's in this department store, they're coming back from an interview. She wants to stop in and get towels for her daughters. And she faces this situation where she has to take one life to save another. In the weeks that follow, she's hailed a hero, but inside she is just completely overwrought with guilt and with doubt. For those of you who don't know my work, I have a history in family law and psychology, and all of my books take a deep dive into some aspect of psychology. And in this book, it is about trauma and what it does to us. So Elise can't remember that exact moment when she fired her gun and took this life. She can't remember if it was necessary. And so she tries to find this man whose life she saved, but he disappeared from the scene and they haven't been able to find him. When he does reappear, she engages with him, hoping to get closure, but he's not who he says he is. And what ends up happening after that is a game of cat and mouse with this man. And she has to bring to bear all of her resources, all of her training to keep herself and her family safe. Complicating all this is that she used to teach forensic science and her classes are online. And guess who's read all of the material? The man from the department store. So while she is in this cat and mouse game with this sociopath, he knows everything that she does. So he's almost one step ahead of her at every turn. There is also a second narration, which involves a hunting shelter in the deep woods in a neighboring town. And the shelter has a cremation oven that's normally used for animals. But human remains are found in this oven. And that investigation pops in and out throughout the book to layer in more plot and more mystery. So this book, what I tried to accomplish was to have a really complex mystery, whodunit kind of feel, but with a fast-paced forward action thriller and this very deep psychological, dive into trauma, psychology. What does it do to us when we experience a traumatic event that forever changes our lives? And I just want to say that I love doing book groups. If you want to have an idea of what they feel like, I always, do whatever the book group wants to talk about. We often talk about how to construct a plot that's complicated like this. And we always talk about the psychology and what is behind someone who's a sociopath and what trauma does to people, where it comes from in the brain. I know all of this stuff, and book groups really love diving into it because it impacts all of us, people we know, ourselves, events going on around us. So book groups are always so lively and fun. And so I hope you'll get the book, and I hope you'll find me on social media and have me at your book group. And thanks for being here.
Thank you, Wendy. And I can attest her books are unputdownable. I could talk to her all night about the suspense, the psychology, incredible. And Wendy is going to be one of our 6 book bingo authors on February 2nd. So tune in then and you get to hear from her again and have another chance to win a copy of her book. Thank you, Wendy. Last and certainly not least is Heather Webb, the USA Today bestselling and award-winning author of 8 historical novels. In 2015, Rodin's Lover was a Goodreads top pick. And in 2018, I'm really dating myself, Last Christmas in Paris won the Women's Fiction Writers Association Star Award. Her latest book, Strangers in the Night, is about the tumultuous romance that scandalized the world. Frank Sinatra and Ava Gardner fought, loved, and lived life to the hilt. Now their unbridled story is brought vividly to life. Welcome, Heather.
Hi, thank you for having me. I am the caboose on this train, ladies. So I'm going to wrap it up. I'm delighted to be here, of course, and I just listened to a lot of really exciting and excellent books. And so I hope this can hang among you brilliant women. This is the book, and I'm going to do something. Does this work? If I take myself out of it, can you see the cover? Strangers in the Night. It is a novel of Frank and Ava, as Susan said, and it was a really, really fun and fascinating book to research. It was a fun and fascinating book to write. It is a Frank Sinatra that you think you know, but you really don't. He's a man down on his luck. He is desperate to succeed. Has all this unbridled talent with nowhere to go with it, and is trying very hard to make it when he meets Ava Gardner. And at this point, Ava has been on the cover of 35 magazines nationwide, newspapers all over the world. Her star is rising. She's got sass, she's got wit. She's one of the most beautiful humans probably ever to walk the earth. And she can hang with Sinatra's swagger and then some. So you've got these two people who are very talented, both from a sort of lower income, struggling neighborhoods, one urban with Sinatra in Jersey, right across the river there from New York City. And then Ava is from a very, very small town in North Carolina that barely makes it on the map. So they relate to a lot of things. They meet each other with all this passion and all this talent, and it's like a match to lighter fluid, and they explode. It's hard to explain. I'm looking at Renee because Renee actually read the book, and at the end of the day, the book is about different kinds of love. It's about how we change over time in our love. It's about the cost of fame. And the whole story is encased, of course, in old Hollywood, both the glamour and the sort of dark underbelly. So you get a lot of information and a lot of sort of world of old Hollywood mixed in there. So the book is out in 7 weeks. I'm really excited to share it with you all. And just like everyone, it's available everywhere. And yeah, I hope to talk to you about it sometime soon.
Thank you, Heather. We can't wait to read it. So that concludes our 20 author Pitch Fest for 2023. I especially thank our authors. I know this was 2 hours and you guys are busy and we appreciate your time, but we're excited that so many readers attended, and we hope that you are marking these books on your to be read list, that you are going to Novel Network, registering your book club, registering your library reading club, picking these books, scheduling visits